There is a strange moment that happens to almost everyone. You are doing something ordinary, maybe walking through a familiar street, sitting in a classroom, or talking to someone you know well. Suddenly, a thought appears that feels oddly distant, almost like you are watching yourself from outside. For a brief second, the mind asks a quiet question. What if everything I experience right now is only happening inside my brain? This idea feels unsettling, but it reveals something important about how perception actually works. What you experience as reality is not the world directly. It is a reconstruction built by the brain. Your eyes do not truly see the world the way a camera records an image. They capture fragments of light. Tiny packets of electromagnetic information enter the eye and strike specialized cells in the retina. These cells convert light into electrical signals and send them through the optic nerve toward the visual cortex at the back of the brain. At this stage, there is still no image in the way you imagine it. There are only signals. Inside the visual cortex, those signals begin to be processed by different neural systems. Some neurons specialize in detecting edges and shapes. Others respond to motion. Some detect color contrasts. Each small group analyzes a different piece of the puzzle. The brain then assembles these fragments together into something that feels like a continuous picture. But here is the important detail. The brain does not simply assemble information. It also fills in gaps. Your visual field contains enormous blind spots. For example, the point where the optic nerve exits the retina contains no light-detecting cells at all. There is literally a hole in your vision, yet you never notice it because the brain automatically fills the missing information using surrounding patterns. In other words, part of what you see is invented by the brain. The same principle applies to time. The brain does not process events instantly. There is a small delay between receiving sensory information and constructing a conscious experience. During that delay, the brain collects incoming signals and builds a coherent interpretation. By the time you become aware of what you see or hear, the brain has already processed and slightly edited the information. This editing process is necessary because the world is too complex for raw perception. Millions of signals bombard your senses every second. If the brain tried to represent everything exactly as it is, perception would become chaotic and overwhelming. Instead, the brain simplifies reality. It predicts what should be there and fills in details based on past experience. Neuroscientists often describe this as predictive perception. The brain constantly generates models of the world and then compares incoming sensory data to those models. When the data matches the prediction, perception feels stable. When it does not match, the brain updates the model. This means perception is partly guesswork. Imagine walking through a forest at night. You see a shape in the distance that resembles a person standing still. Your brain immediately interprets the shape using the closest familiar pattern. For a moment, you believe someone is there. As you move closer, you realize it is only a tree branch. The brain predicted incorrectly, then corrected itself when new information arrived. This happens constantly, but usually the predictions are accurate enough that you never notice the process. Your sense of sound works the same way. The ears detect vibrations in the air, but the meaning of those vibrations depends on interpretation by auditory regions of the brain. When someone speaks, the brain does not simply hear sound waves. It recognizes patterns that match language you already know. If someone speaks a language you do not understand, the sounds become meaningless noise. The sensory input is the same, but the brain lacks the predictive model to interpret it. The sensory data has not changed. The interpretation has. Expectation can even alter physical sensations. In medical research, placebo effects demonstrate that belief alone can trigger real physiological changes. If the brain expects relief from pain, neural systems can release chemicals that actually reduce discomfort. The brain predicted improvement and the body followed. All of this suggests that the mind is not a passive observer of reality. It is an active constructor. The colors you see, the sounds you hear, the emotions you feel, and the meaning you assign to events all emerge from the brain's attempt to organize signals into a coherent experience. This does not mean the external world is an illusion. The world exists independently of your mind, but the version you experience is always shaped by how your brain processes information. In a way, each person lives inside a slightly different reality because each brain has different memories, expectations, and predictive models. Two people can witness the same event and remember it differently because their brains highlighted different details and interpreted them through different emotional contexts. Your perception is a collaboration between the outside world and the inside structure of your brain. The strange thought that everything happens inside your brain is not entirely wrong. Light, sound, pressure, and temperature exist outside you. But the colors, voices, textures, and sensations you experience exist only as patterns of neural activity. Reality reaches you as signals. Your brain turns those signals into a world. And the world you believe you see is actually the story your brain tells itself about what is out there. And if the story your brain tells itself about what is out there is always filtered, always edited, always shaped by prediction and memory and expectation, then the most important question is not what is real. The most important question is whether the story you are living inside is serving you or limiting you. Because here is what most people never consider. You are not just a passive recipient of your brain's constructed reality. You are also one of its primary inputs. The beliefs you hold, the emotions you rehearse, the expectations you carry into every room, every conversation, every new morning, all of these feed directly back into the predictive model. They influence what the brain looks for, they shape what it finds. They determine in ways far more literal than most people realize what reality you actually experience. This is not mysticism, it is neuroscience. When you hold a deeply embedded belief that people cannot be trusted, the brain does not wait to be proven right. It begins scanning for evidence immediately. It amplifies signals that confirm the belief and minimizes signals that contradict it. A neutral glance becomes suspicion. A delayed reply becomes rejection. A moment of silence becomes hostility. The brain is not lying to you. It is doing exactly what it was designed to do, confirming its own model as efficiently as possible. This is confirmation bias at the neural level, and it runs constantly beneath language, beneath logic, beneath your ability to simply decide to think differently, which is why willpower alone rarely changes perception. You cannot think your way out of a predictive model that operates faster than thought. You cannot argue with a system that processes social signals in milliseconds and delivers conclusions before you have finished forming a question. What you can do is change the inputs over time. Repeated exposure to experiences that contradict the old model, relationships that consistently behave differently than the brain predicted, environments that return different data than the ones that built the original forecast. These experiences do not change the brain instantly, but they accumulate. Each disconfirming data point creates a small prediction error. And prediction errors are precisely what drives neural updating. The brain does not revise its model because you asked it to. It revises its model because the evidence eventually becomes too inconsistent to ignore. This is also why healing is rarely linear. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. A moment of genuine openness followed by a sudden collapse into the old narrative. This is not failure. This is the brain oscillating between an outdated model and an emerging one, trying to determine which has more predictive power. The oscillation itself is part of the process. There is something quietly profound in understanding this. It means that even the darkest, most entrenched version of reality you have been living inside is not permanent. It is a model, and models can be revised, not by force, not by positive thinking layered over unprocessed experience, but by the patient, consistent introduction of evidence that the world and you yourself are capable of something the old story never allowed for. Every genuine connection you permit despite the prediction of rejection updates the model. Every risk you take that turns out survivable recalibrates the threat estimate. Every moment you remain present in discomfort without the predicted catastrophe materializing teaches the brain that its forecast was wrong. Slowly, the story changes, not because the world became different, but because you gave your brain enough new material to write a better one, and that may be the most radical act available to a human being, not changing reality.